Welcome to the Deconstructing Data live stream and podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, BDEX's founder and CEO. What's new, David?
Here we are once again.
Here we are.
Looking forward to another good episode with a repeat guest. That is a timely guest once again after 2 years. After her being with us 2 years ago, right after the Super Bowl last time, we're going to have another conversation about Super Bowl ads. So it should be fun.
Absolutely. So I'm excited as well. It's always a great conversation. So today on Deconstructing Data, we're thrilled to welcome on Latha Sarathy. Say welcome back on, Latha. She's the CEO and founder of Salient HQ and Chief Research Officer at Videotape AI. Welcome back to the show, Latha.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jessie and David, for having me back. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we. And we know who you are. We've had these conversations before, but for anybody that missed the last episode 2 years ago, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, give a little bit of background about, where you came from and how you got to where you are today, and what you kind of work you're working on today.
Sure. So when we last spoke in 24, I was the Chief Research Officer at the ANA, the Association of National Advertisers. And I'd spent most of my career in media and marketing before coming to the ANA. I left there at the end of 24 and started my own fractional research agency, Salient HQ. And we work on a lot of large and small projects for associations, brands, nonprofits, media companies. And at the same time, I was advising several research startups. And one of them was Videotape AI. And I really liked the founder's approach to being very AI first, really trying to remove a lot of the friction in research, quicker to market, easier data, very digital data for clients. It became a really better client experience, but they kept humans front and center. So with every study they do, we have video selfies from respondents. So you're hearing their voices, seeing their faces in a very unfiltered way. And I think that's so important today, keeping humans front and center as we move into this AI age. So those are some of the things I've been working on.
Sounds great. And yeah, we're big fans of AI, but we're also big fans in keeping humans in the loop as well. And so being able to, sort of combine humans and using AI to, enhance what people can do is something that we're big components of here. But I'm looking forward to jumping into the topics. I mean, we have this interesting first topic, which is gender representation in Super Bowl ads. So I'd love to dig into this with you. I know this is something we talked about, 2 years ago.
Yes.
Gender representation in ads, and so it'd be really interesting to get your take, especially in light of the recent Super Bowl and the wild advertising that we saw.
Yeah. So this is a topic that's really close to my heart. When I was at the ANA, I oversaw all research and measurement for See Her, which was their initiative to focusing on gender equality in media and marketing. And a lot of the research we did showed a really strong correlation, clear correlation between the accurate portrayal and representation of women and girls in advertising to increase in sales ROI. We did several waves of this study, and we saw every single time that sales increased, for women, but for men, for people of color, it was a very clear-cut connection. But when we also looked at trending in Super Bowl advertising, we never saw parity of women represented in terms of ads in the Super Bowl, compared to the percentage of women in the population. So it fluctuated, but it never reached parity. And with the latest Super Bowl, the same was true. Roughly 40% of the ads had women, but that's still not at parity with a percent of women in the US. And when you think about older women, women of different body types, that's definitely not at parity. So this is something that is still an issue. And, we know that diversity and when people can see themselves it is a clear connection to a brand and a clear motivator of purchase intent. So this is still something that is a problem to solve. I think there's more awareness around it, so that's great. But we're still moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So I'm going to bring up what to me I think is sort of a controversial topic when it comes to gender representation in ads. And there was a Super Bowl ad with, one of the most sort of popular things going around right now is GLP-1s, right? And so there was an ad with Serena Williams promoting GLP-1s, and I know she's been doing that recently, and it was included in Super Bowl ads. I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because my thought on it is I kind of feel like, I don't know how or when or why, but she's changed her stance, and I don't know if it's a good thing, because I thought that her theme in the past was acceptance and accepting her for who she is, and how women should feel that way, right? And I kind of feel like this new sort of version of her now is she's saying, hey, I feel great now because I lost weight. And that's kind of a complete 180 from what I thought she was all about before.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your take on that, because when it comes to gender representation, like, is that, what are you seeing there? Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing there? Is that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but I just feel uncomfortable with this new version of her and her representing, a weight loss drug.
Yeah, no, I hear you totally. I think that it is definitely something to come to terms with. And let me zoom it out a little bit. There was a lot of conversation around this, not necessarily just around gender, but when a lot of brands were called out, the whole Budweiser thing, the Target in stepping away or trying to move into areas that were not core to their brand. And the after all the analysis that was done, all the research that was done post that, what we really found was that when a brand is not true to their DNA, to what they have stood for, to the audience that they are most connected with, there can be a backlash, and there can be a sense that they are betraying their brand, moving away, and either they have to be aligned with taking that criticism and saying, no, this is now our stance. This is now what we believe, and we're going forward. Or they can back up and acknowledge that, it was a mistake or whatever. But that alignment of the brand DNA to everything that they stand for and, put out in the world needs to be consistent, unless there's a clear reason that they're making a shift. So thinking about Serena Williams and this change, I think it's definitely a shift. But it could be disturbing, but from what I have seen, what I've read about it, and I haven't extensively read about it, this is something that she personally feels strongly about, and is really putting herself, her brand, her equity behind it. So maybe there is a shift in her thinking, in her perspective. But again, going back to that, it needs to be authentic. So we can give her the benefit of the doubt that this is authentic, but I think it's kind of a wait and see.
Yeah, it definitely throws me off a little bit, because I always thought that her brand was, I'm a woman, I'm strong, I'm a champion, I can do anything. And now it's like, oh, I feel better now that I lost weight. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know, rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, she talks about it from a health perspective. So I don't know. I mean, it's complicated, but and I don't know if it's because there's so much around weight loss, particularly for women. Is it, do you have to be a certain way to be accepted, to be considered attractive? So all of that plays into it. So I hear you. But I think we need a little bit more time to parse it out. That's my feeling.
Yeah, understand. So tell us more about the effects of gender representation in advertisements. I know we talked a little bit about this a couple of years ago, but I'd love to hear not only, about that in general, but how has it evolved in the last couple of years as well?
I think there's been a lot of shifts up and down with, accurate representation overall, not just of women, but of multicultural, groups. I think a lot of it is political pressure. So there's definitely been fluctuations. And I think also when I think back to when I was at CHER, and this was a very front and center issue for marketers and media companies, that has definitely waned. That urgency, that sense that this is something we must tackle, I think has become much softer because of pressures. And that's very unfortunate because women still remain 50% of the population and the ones who influence the most purchasing decisions. 87% of purchasing decisions are influenced by women. That hasn't changed. But now suddenly the focus seems to be less on this issue. So that's really unfortunate. And one of the kind of things that I keep thinking about in this study that we did with videotape on the Super Bowl, we found that 83% of women said that diversity in ads were extremely or very important to them and increased their purchase intent. And we've seen this consistently. All of the research I've done, this is very, very unchanging because, again, as I said before, people want to see themselves. So what's happened in the last 2 years? In a sense, nothing has changed, but a lot has changed because now we are less willing, again, because of current pressures, to say that we need to work on this issue. It may still be worked on, but it's kind of completely under the radar now.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think it's something that will continue to evolve. And I think that, to your point, consumer feedback is probably what will help it evolve as well.
Yeah. And just the economics of it all, people spending power. A lot of women spend a lot of money.
Yes.
And, certain brands figure out who their target audience is and how to appeal to their pain points like good marketers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I can't remember if we discussed this 2 years ago, but when in our previous episode with you. But I remember when I was working with some people on some campaigns in the automotive space, I learned something that was really interesting. Is that I don't remember this exact statistic, but it was a number that basically showed that women play a greater role in making decisions in purchasing a car than men. And so, to your point, you need to think about, as an advertiser, who you're advertising to, right?
Absolutely. And, that purchasing power is both direct in terms of buying products, but in the case of automotive, influencing decisions. So from both angles, women need to be considered very seriously when you're thinking about advertising and connecting with people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
100%. Good stuff. Well, I find that topic really interesting. But our second topic is audience values and brand alignment. And I know we're talking specifically about the Super Bowl ads, but I feel like with all of this talk about like gender representation and like next we're talking about cultural impact, it's hard for me not to think about halftime too. I'd be curious. But maybe we don't have any data on it, but like what an interesting halftime for what's going on in the world.
Yeah. And we actually have some data on it. We did a lot of research on this in our Super Bowl study. But, let me start with this, and I love this topic, is that this is such a key area that we need to be thinking about, especially now. And I don't mean it as sort of like the next thing or let's create a metric around it. I think there's been a fundamental shift in how consumers are connecting with products and services they buy. Trust is becoming more of the market differentiator for brands. And here's the key thing about trust: you really can't fake it, not in the long run, because trust is built on transparency and consistency. And this is where that brand alignment makes so much sense. And then going to the Super Bowl and the halftime show, we really see this importance of values coming in. So we know that the Bad Bunny halftime show was a watershed moment for Hispanics in the US. He is the number one streamer on Spotify. He broke historic records by winning Best Album for a Spanish, language album. And he performs in Spanish, but he is American. Puerto Rico is part of America. And the halftime show acknowledged this and celebrated this. Um, and here's the interesting thing when we think about values alignment for Hispanics, they saw this as a celebration of Latino culture and achievement, very strongly, of course. But non Hispanics also saw this as a celebration and an evolution of American music. So, when you, again, thinking about values, they each approached it from a slightly different angle. And it makes total sense when you see your own community represented. It's a very personal excitement. But thinking about Bad Bunny and his music, this is part of American culture now. This is something that means something to a lot of people. And to say, yeah, I listen to this music and this is now an evolution of American music is just as valid a response. So values can mean slightly different things to different groups of people. But the fact that this show aligned to a cultural reality in this country, it's a win-win. And that's why I thought it was so such a great thing. And this is, I think, kind of core to the American ethos. And we actually asked respondents if they thought that the choice of Bad Bunny was un-American, and 87% said they did not think that way. So here's where really understanding the cultural pulse and not just kind of the loudest voices in the room makes so much difference. And so this alignment of values and brands is again, like I said, very, very important, but it needs to be done right, and it needs to really kind of go under the hood.
I also think that they ultimately just achieved exactly what they wanted to achieve, was to get everybody talking about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, well, it got me thinking about, well, who picks the halftime show and organizes that, and who's their audience? I mean, because it was in California. And so, like, maybe whatever that location is, the 49ers have a really great number of data, like the data probably shows them that Hispanic men or
Yeah.
people who speak Spanish are more likely to watch or attend the NFL. So why not appeal to them?
Yeah.
So like, I have no idea, but
This was the highest rated Super Bowl. And actually it's Jay-Z's company who sets up the halftime show and picks the artist.
Oh.
So that is a real clear pulse on culture. And I don't, and this is what I think is so cool. It wasn't just about Hispanics. They are a huge part of the country. They are very important in terms of economic growth. But it was about America. And that's the thing that I'm saying about the values. You can connect to it with a slightly different perspective, but it's still a value. I'm not Hispanic, but I thought it was fantastic. I loved the show. And I do think it's an evolution of American music. So I can be just as connected and say, oh, wow, it represents my values, even though it might be slightly different from how somebody else sees it as their values.
Yeah. So interesting.
I go back to what I said before, in the sense that I think they achieved what they wanted. The goal is to make it the most talked about show, right? I mean, if you had a boring halftime show, that would just be detrimental to the entire, event, right? I mean, they're trying to create hype. They're trying to get, have the highest viewership every year. Like how can they top, this next year? That's the goal, right? Every year they have to top last year. And so, when, Jay-Z and his team are thinking about how can we top last year, they have to be thinking about, okay, we have to do something that's going to, intrigue people, that's going to
Sure.
get people talking about it, that's going to get people to watch it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
They achieve that.
one of the core, that's one of the main things about a brand that they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like, what do you both think? Since the pandemic, brands have been more likely to show some of their political values or cultural values publicly than in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely on the cultural side, for sure. I think that there's been a lot more inclusion, for
Mhm,
sure. That's
mhm.
been really important, and I think everyone's looking for that.
Yes.
So, and that's sort of an expectation, and so that if you're not doing that, then then you're not going to sort of drive the activity that you're trying to drive, which is viewership.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right, Jesse. This really started to pick up momentum around the pandemic after the murder of George Floyd, all that social unrest. This became something that could not be avoided. So it entered into the brand conversation. And since then, consumers are looking for this. But it goes back to the alignment when several of them, and we have definitely seen in all of the research that the focus on this over the last few years post pandemic has dropped.
Mm.
So the fact that brands are pulling back, or the DEI focus was kind of like a momentary thing, and then it was kind of like, okay, we're back to business or whatever. That is something consumers are definitely aware of and are taking note of. So this goes back to the trust. If you're going to flip flop, or if you're not going to be consistent, you're going to lose trust. And that eventually is going to erode brand loyalty, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah. Know yourself, know your audience.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Measuring cultural impact through data. So be curious to hear what you learned in terms of all of this.
Yeah, this is a great question, particularly in this context of the Super Bowl. I actually think the NFL is an excellent example of, understanding cultural signals, which then leads to impact. So the NFL perspective of choosing Bad Bunny was very, very smart, um, because it understood the cultural pulse of the country, but it was, sort of like what you were saying. It's also economically very pragmatic, having that constant conversation about them. And the NFL senior vice president, Marissa Solis, said that, league growth is mathematically not possible without Latinos. There are 39 million Latinos who watch the Super Bowl. So, and they anticipated controversy from conservatives, but they still went ahead with this, probably to fuel that conversation, but also because it just made sense. And in the study that we did at Videotape, we found that 68% of non-Hispanics rated the show positively. So they really, hit on a cultural moment, a moment that would create conversation and, that sense of buzz for their brand. But they did it in the right way, and they really hooked on to something that was important. And actually, fun fact, Duolingo saw a 35% increase in Spanish language learners during and after the show. So this was really something that was happening. And talking, from the data perspective, the impact, our data showed that 67% of Hispanics and 52% of non-Hispanics said they were extremely or very likely to purchase from brands that, had authentic representation. So I think the NFL understands that the halftime show is also a commercial for their brand. And doing that and putting, Bad Bunny in the halftime show, like I said, they understood cultural signals, but it was extremely economically pragmatic. And that's the win-win. That's the combination you want. Cultural relevance will almost always lead to future revenue, but you got to get it right. And I think they actually did get it right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and that's great. The studies that you're able to do and get sort of that feedback really, justifies, everything that we've been talking about in this conversation, which was, really what their goal was, you know, in producing that halftime show.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about it probably for years to come. Maybe there'll be a documentary about it.
Yes.
We may have to make this like an annual thing to have this conversation.
Yes,
Totally.
absolutely.
Just make it
Absolutely.
annually recurring.
You
It
know,
is
sorry to interrupt, but in the study we did, as I said, we asked respondents to provide answers to open ends through video feedback. And one young Hispanic woman said that she was just happy to be alive at this time when this happened. So it's that kind of a cultural moment. So I think you're right. There may be a documentary, and we will be talking about it for years to come.
Yeah, interesting. That's so cool. So you do this research every year then, even still. So
Mhm,
yeah, we should set up an annual discussion. I'm curious. So it sounds like just from listening to you, some of the takes are like brands should have a stance, but
mhm,
be authentic and like consistent with it
mhm,
because, if people are swaying their or brands are swaying their political stance with whoever's president, then,
mhm,
that's not
mhm.
going to be good to build
No.
trust. Trust is hard to come by these days.
Mhm.
So having that consistent message will help. But what else would you say you've learned from all this overall?
Um, I think the key thing for me as I do this type of research, what I call more purpose driven research, is that I think brands or media in general underestimate consumers. And, they have their personas, they have a lot of data that they look at on a trended basis, but you constantly have to have your pulse on what people are thinking, what they're feeling. It could be economic situations, it could be social things. Um, but again and again, because I've seen the same results pop up, that people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be reflected, they want to know that they are important. Fundamental human things are not always front and center for brands, and it's
Yeah.
understandable. They got to talk about their products and all of that stuff. But if this is not the foundation of your brand messaging at some level, I think you're missing a very important factor. And I think, as we've discussed with the pandemic and everything else, this just kind of rose to the surface. It was always there, but it rose to the surface, and greater awareness. So that's one of the things I've learned, and I feel that it should be more ingrained in marketing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, agree 100%.
David, it makes me think of the one, I guess you could say maybe slightly political thing we did as BDEX was the banner on the website when Ukraine was first being attacked.
Hmm.
I thought that was a good move. We saw a lot of businesses and brands kind of do the same thing around that. Trying to think of other events. You mentioned George Floyd. We saw them
Mhm,
coming out with like the Black Lives Matter thing, brands
mhm,
putting like the black. I think on Pride, we see a lot of brands that'll either put up rainbows or show their support that way.
Hmm.
But if anyone else is listening, like I'd be curious to hear from others, like what do you see brands doing these days that's a little bit different in terms of taking a stance? But yeah, I don't know. That's so interesting. What other thoughts do either of you have on any of that?
I don't know. This is Latha's business, not mine.
Yeah, I think that there's so many ways for brands to show up. It doesn't have to be, you know, just the way. There's things that you can do for the community, which I think people really value. It's really, again, being true to your DNA and really thinking long term about what do you want to stand for, what do you want to be known for. It doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to be, um, big and bold. It could be small, but it should be relevant, again, to your brand and really have an impact on people. And I just feel like the more we get into AI, the more I feel like that personal connection is going to come back as something very, very important. So, as I said, as I've done this research, that human element, and this is what attracted me to videotape AI, that human element is just, we're people. At the end of the day, we're people. I don't know how many robots are going to take over, but I think we're still people to people. So, yeah, I think that's really very critical.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback, right, comes from people, and you can use AI for feedback, but the AI is generating that from, the human element.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yes.
Definitely. And in good marketing, we're appealing to people's emotions.
Yes.
So what appeals to people's emotions more than politics or even music, like the halftime show?
Yeah.
It kind of brings all of that stuff together really beautifully for brands.
No, definitely.
Yeah, well, this is a really great conversation. We could talk about it more, but I'm curious from a tech stack perspective. I'm trying to remember maybe what you told us last time. I think it might have been around research, but any thoughts on any new tools that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have come across that you'd want to share, some of your favorites?
Sure. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about AI, right? But I'll tell you, as a solopreneur, when I started Salient HQ, I could not have done as many projects as I did, as much output as I did without AI. So it is definitely part of my tech stack now. And, the way I used it for briefs, for proposals, presentations, data analysis, to create surveys. And to be clear, with each of these, I always did the foundational work. I wrote down my thoughts, my outlines, my objectives, had it clear in my mind, but then use the LLM to, kind of feed it back to me, refine it. And I thought it was, I think it's great in that respect. It saves so much time. It really kind of clarifies a lot of things that you may have been thinking. And again, it just plays it back to you in a really great way. So it's definitely been a great tool. And I use several. I use Claude, I use ChatGPT, I use another tool for presentations. But I think it's also a thought partner. Sometimes when I'm thinking through a topic, thinking through positioning, really trying to, aggregate and synthesize a lot of research, I'll use it as a sort of back and forth. And it's been very helpful in that sense as well. I always think about context, so I'm always reading it, even if it's kind of like rewriting something. I'm always reading it to say, is this context right? Has it gotten my voice? Is this really what I'm trying to say? So that always has to be there, I think, but definitely a very big part of my tech stack, and also Videotape's tech stack in terms of how the whole platform was built. So yeah, that's definitely where we're going these days.
Definitely.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I love AI. It is a great partner. You're right. Just have conversations with it about anything, really.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been another really awesome episode. Thank you so much, Latha.
Of course, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks again, Latha. I appreciate you joining us again on this show to have another really interesting conversation. And maybe we'll make this an annual thing so that we
I
can
would love
meet
that.
after the Super Bowl every year and have this really
Awesome.
insightful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you both, David and Jesse. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And in closing, Latha, would you like to let listeners know how they can find you after the show?
Sure. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share my email. It's Latha, Latha, at videotape1word.ai, or my fractional research agency, which is Latha at Salient, Salient, HQ, all one word, .com.
Awesome. All right. Well, go ahead and close us out with the video. See everyone next week.
Thank you.
So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. build authentic connections with your audience, and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit bdex.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX. Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jesse Lezak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time.